Alrighty, well, welcome everybody to today's webcast. I'm Chris Vogel from Apogee. I'm joined by Kris Kleva from L.L Bean and Rajesh Jadhav from Apogee. Today's discussion is around L.L Bean's experiences with Black Friday 2014 in their API program and how that has shaped their preparation for upcoming Black Friday 2015. Hard to believe, we're almost 6 months exactly from Black Friday 2015, 180 days, to 182 days to be exact. I'm sure most of you are well aware of that, probably already starting to think about it. We hope you find today's discussion valuable. Kris and Rajesh are going to do most of the talking. I'll help drive the slides, and let me go over a little bit about what we plan to cover today. So we'll talk, as I said, we'll talk about L.L Bean's, Kris will talk about L.L Bean's API journey and kind of the road to and through Black Friday 2014. We'll spend some time talking about some of the things that L.L Bean and Apogee have learned through their experiences with Black Friday and some ideas on how to begin to prepare for that. And then both through Black Friday 2015 as well as beyond, we've got a bit of a chronology. A little bit of housekeeping logistics before we jump into it. So we are recording today's webcast, and we'll make it available along with the slides on SlideShare. We'll also, scheduled for an hour, we think the presentation will go about 45 minutes, the discussion, and we'll leave time for Q&A at the end. Please post any questions to the Q&A section. We'll try and get to those during the discussion, and if not, we'll get them to QA. Or in the Q&A. We'll also post these out to our Apogee community if there's questions that we're unable to answer, so you all can reference there. And if you do have any audio problems, please post those in the Q&A section as well. So with that, let's get right to it. We'll start and have Rajesh and Kris introduce themselves, and then from there, Kris will take over. So Rajesh.
Hi everyone, my name is Rajesh Jadhav. I lead the API and core services team at Apogee. Kris.
Hi, my name is Kris Kleva. I am the product owner and technical lead for the API platform here at L.L Bean. When we first started thinking about this webinar, I thought we need to have a little bit of a theme, and I looked around and I found this great quote that we used in a couple other presentations, and I wanted to share it with you all because I think it's really inspirational and it puts me in the right mindset for getting ready for Black Friday. And it goes, "Success is neither magical nor mysterious, and that success is a natural consequence of consistently applying some basic fundamentals." And I think this is really applicable to APIs, and it comes from this great book by Jim Rohn that it breaks that down into 5 separate pieces. And basically, the way Jim thinks about success is into these 5 different categories. Well, philosophy, how do we think? Our attitude, what are our feelings, and how do we sort of let people know about those? Our actions, what do we do, or what are our activities? And the results, how do we measure success, and what sort of results do we expect to get out of that? And if all this goes well, we have a great lifestyle, and our lifestyle is made, we can make our life out in the way that we would like. So I think it's really important when we think about Peak and we think about APIs that we bake this into our own DNA and then take these same kind of philosophies and see how we can apply them to peak capacity planning and also our API management. So when we think about philosophy, how do we think about capacity planning? Do we have a mantra? Do we have a saying that we all can rally around? Is our attitude passionate? Do we take preparation as a priority? And what are our actions to show for this passion? Is functional and load testing part of our definition of done when we put an API on production? And finally, what sort of results are we measuring, and how are we communicating those results to the folks that need to know? So we started this journey with APIs and API management about 18 months ago, and I call it a journey because it's definitely not the path of least resistance. And it's something that a team of people, start off with, and they may not really know where they're getting ready to go, but they know that there's some sort of surprise and some sort of success down at the end of the tunnel. But we know things like HTTP and APIs and all the technology that surrounds it isn't an easy thing. But we know that if we master it, that it's going to make our digital transformation a little bit easier to achieve. So I want to break down our journey a little bit more. And let you know a little bit about what our team made up of and some of our strategies. So our team is made up of about 10 key roles. Those range everywhere from executive sponsorship to business and technology owners. And then the Scrum team that actually continuously delivers APIs to production. So that's a product owner, technical leads, Scrum masters, API developers, and API testers. Also, I think we have kind of this extended team because there's a lot of other target systems that we work with. So those business analysts and those architects from across the enterprise are constantly playing guest appearances on the API platform team. And what's been great is that we've got to really work with folks that are in different parts of the company. So whether it's we're working with e-commerce people, e-commerce architects, or mobile architects, or architects in the financial or marketing areas, those roles are all really important.
Hey Chris, how big is your current team, and which role you found was a surprise in terms of being most useful? I mean, I know every role is important, but which was a surprise for you?
Yeah. Well, our team's around I'd say 6 to 8 people that are part of the Scrum, right? We're talking every day, we're delivering together. But honestly, I feel like the biggest roles that were a surprise going into this, the roles I didn't think were going to play such a big part, are definitely executive leadership. Like I think you can start off a program like this, making it be a very, very technical thing, and feel that, hey, only developers really care about this. But if you don't have somebody with a VP title or a director title or an executive title kind of watching over what's going on, you can really lose track. And then I think the other aspect of it is the concept of Scrum. Product ownership and Scrum Masters weren't something that we initially thought we would get into when we built this. We figured, hey, this is a cut and dry 3 to 6 month project. We're going to build all our APIs and we're going to shelf this. And that totally didn't turn out to be the case. We continuously deliver these to production. And then finally, I think one of the biggest roles that was a surprise about how essential it was to the success of the program is the tester, the QA guy. The guys who help us make sure we share the proper quality.
Okay.
So, a couple other points about the journey. I feel like we've made this promise. API management is not a cheap endeavor by any means, and this promise of continuous delivery in exchange for predictable velocity. And we've really made a point to try to achieve that and make sure that that's our driving force, that we're able to very accurately estimate how long an API is going to take and what sort of tasks are involved in putting it together, and then also continuously moving things out to production. And what's resulted from that is it's really built dozens and dozens of APIs, and they've been rapidly expanding. And they focus on the core e-commerce scenarios, like getting products and adding products to your bag or your wish list, and to even more advanced situations where you're maybe doing marketing scenarios, or adding payment methods to your account, and even some more business and technical use cases. So it's a huge list, and it's constantly getting bigger. And I have to say, now with the Internet of Things, I feel that list is going to continuously grow beyond wherever we can think of today. So it's really been exploding. And finally, I want to say that, like I mentioned with the roles, it turns out that testing really is the name of the game with APIs. So every API that we have, every resource, every verb, are all built out with tests. We use JMeter. We love it. And we not only test the APIs that are executing our backend systems, but also those of third parties, our partners, and even those ones that run on the Apigee platform that we found that are mission critical to us. So out of all this, we ended up with hundreds of JMeter tests and thousands of test cases. And the great thing about using a tool like JMeter is you can do both functional and load testing, performance and security all wrapped in one.
Great. So, Chris, how often do you release new APIs, and what is your aspirational goal there?
You think about the digital natives in the world, right? The GitHubs and the Apachees in the world, and they're able to deliver things to production, multiple times a week. So I'd love to get there. That would be incredible. Right now, we're we're releasing APIs into production about every 2 weeks.
Mhm.
But it wasn't always that way. It's definitely been a journey. We started off with our first API, and that nearly took a month and a half. And now we're at the point where we can release, design, test, and deploy multiple APIs in a single 2-week sprint. So we've come a long way. And with Apogee's leadership, I think we're able to continue to make that faster.
Awesome. So I'm going to transition here. Rajesh, why don't you talk a little bit about kind of Apogee's unique role and where we fit in this whole planning?
Of course, yeah. So as most of you know, Apogee has an industry-agnostic platform. Therefore, we serve multiple industries and multiple customers of a given industry. That puts us in a unique situation where we are able to see the goods and bads of every single customer, what worked, what did not work. We are able to take some of those learnings and apply it to a different customer within the same industry or a different customer of a different industry. So that way, we actually get to see lots and lots of, most importantly, negative scenarios, right? I mean, everybody does, understand the positive scenario really well. It's a negative scenario where, your backend is crashing or your proxy is not behaving the way it should. You're getting lots of errors, you have latency, so on and so forth. So here at Apogee, we see these, big events all the time. Like every industry has, one or multiple of them in a given year. For example, Black Friday is obviously big for retailers. We also see, Mobile World Congress around, end of February every year, which is a big event for telcos. We also support a bunch of media customers, and breaking news is another pattern that we really, have hardened over the period of time, because we have seen a typical pattern, as you can see on the graph on the right-hand side. What was coming to us at, let's say, 1,800 transactions per second, in matter of few minutes, it has gone to like, few thousand transactions per second. So it does help us in, serving these customers and these scenarios, so that we can use those learnings, harden the platform, harden our monitoring and alerting and everything around it, and apply that to, different customers and their big events. In addition to that, we also partner with our customers, during these big events, and we make sure that they are prepared from support and operations perspective.
I have to say that's probably one of the things I've really enjoyed about working with Apogee, is that partnership. Raj, can you give me examples maybe when you've worked with a partner and they've pushed you all forward and helped you innovate even your own technologies based on their feedback?
Yeah, totally. Actually, I mean, as I was mentioning the sports events, right? Typically, every Saturday evening, there are customers that bring in 5 or 10 times more traffic to us than a normal peak. So those kind of situations, allowed us to understand those situations and how we address them better technically. For instance, we talk about auto scaling and things such as that, which only help you when the increase is gradual, right? So when you're seeing the traffic going up in matter of hours or days, then you can think of auto scaling, zero maintenance, and all that. But when we see these spikes, there is no auto scaling solution that works that we know of. So in these situations, the only solution we have is to make sure that we schedule these events, and right before those events, we keep our warm capacity ready, so that when these events occur, we don't crash, or we are able to handle the traffic successfully.
Right. So people are introducing all kinds of load at different unexpected times, and then you all are forced to innovate and react. That's great.
Mm-hmm.
What did Black Friday look like for you guys last year in 2013 versus 2014?
Great segue, Kris. Yeah, Rajesh, talk a little bit about kind of what we see, patterns we see, and sort of how this, how this affects us and what we do to respond.
Yeah, actually, I have a slide for that. So as you can see from the slide, we often talk about, yesterday's peak is today's normal, right? So what you would hit as a peak this year, or this Black Friday, or this major event that you're preparing for, it typically ends up being the norm, because as the API industry is doing really well, most of our customers are increasing the coverage of their functionality through APIs, right? So here is the chart that you have on the screen. As you can see, the blue line represents our traffic in year 2013. So for year 2014, as you can see, the on 25th and 26th, what you see as the peak traffic was actually our highest traffic during 2013. And then on the actual Thanksgiving Day, the next morning, which is the Black Friday, you can see the traffic has gone up to like more than 3 times than the average volume.
Awesome. All right, so now we're, as I said, we're 6 months out, Kris. We're 182 days to be exact. So the preparations are beginning. Talk a little bit about what you guys are doing to get ready for the main event.
I'm going to have to use another metaphor here. I'm going to try to keep it in the outdoors because that's what L.L Bean is all about, and I think there's a lot of great analogies that I can use to talk about success and preparing for success. And one of the ones that stuck out to me is the decoy duck, right? So for us, when you're a duck hunter, typically you spend a lot of time studying what ducks look like. You monitor where they're going, you monitor what kind of activities, what kind of sounds they make, and then trying to have success there, you're trying to predict what they're going to do, where they're going to be. And then finally, you spend a lot of time and effort simulating what the duck looks like. So when we talk a little bit about what our philosophy is, on the next slide, we really break this down into a mantra that we want to think of as monitoring and predicting and simulating. So going into 2014, we didn't necessarily know, it was our first peek on the API platform. We knew what kind of traffic we were going to be getting from our core website. That's been up for a really long time. We had a good idea of what was going to happen on the mobile site, but we didn't really have a really good understanding of what was going to happen in the API platform. So we had to start off with something somewhat simple and put that on production and monitor what it was going to do, so we can get an idea of what sort of policies performed in particular ways, what kind of coding practices perform better than others. So that the first part of this is really to monitor what our initial customer was doing, and then also predicting what our future adoption was going to be. So if you're doing this right, ideally you're constantly looking for more adoption, trying to drive more traffic to your API platform, trying to get more developers on board. So for us, our initial consumer was a mobile scenario, and that wasn't, it was a complex use case, but it wasn't a use case that had a whole lot of traffic behind it. But we knew that our next consumer was really going to be a huge traffic spike off of that. So we had to do a pretty good job of looking out and saying, okay, these APIs and these apps are going to start coming online over time, and predict sort of where that was going to go. And then finally, you kind of have to figure out when you're doing this prediction, what sort of other stuff are you going to get? You have your core consumer that has a very specific use case. You have the next consumer that's going to explode your traffic. What else is there? So denial of service attacks, sort of things like buggy application code.
Okay.
Kind of put into that equation. And then what do you do to simulate all this? How do you simulate the duck? How do you create decoys? I think this testing concept really comes into play, is that we were able to use a lot of the existing test cases that we'd already built and just add more load to those and simulate that traffic against the API product gateway, and on the back end, either put mocks sort of handle the other side of that load, or even go against live resources.
Okay.
So for us,
yeah, Kris, I have a question here. So we see this pattern across most of our customers, which is you start something really small, right? You prove that you understand the API space, you know how to expose APIs, how to manage and maintain them, so on and so forth. Now that you are moving into your core business, being exposed through APIs, what are the kind of challenges that you have seen, and what did you have to do to convince your team that hey, let's start getting into more advanced stuff here?
Right. Well, I think that promise of continuous delivery I feel, has been the biggest convincer. Is that we've been able to do a very good job of sort of planning out our work and building those standards for what we're implementing, and then, track the amount of time it takes to implement that and execute it in a very quick, continuously deliverable manner. So I feel like the value that a lot of times we offer teams and why we've been able to have this success is that we know that app developers and system integration, there's a lot of pain points there. And if you're able to solve somebody's pain and you're able to help somebody, be a little bit more efficient and focus on their core business, then usually adoption will come naturally. But you also have to be kind of like an advocate, right? You have to constantly out there evangelizing and making sure that folks understand, we're here to help you. We're here to make your app, perform well, and we're also here to kind of help that back end have its livelihood and its longevity, and allow it to sort of evolve over time, but also keep your app very, very stable. So it's a matter of sort of consistently and continually applying value and helping folks know that you're here to serve them.
So we're at the countdown begins. We want to kind of share with the folks joining today some ideas about what they can start to do and what you all are starting to do to prepare for Black Friday. So let's dive into that. I love the contrast of the great outdoors and this highly technical APIs. I think it's awesome. So Kris, talk to us a little bit about the model going into 2015.
It would have been boring if we just used a bunch of graphs and code stuff.
Exactly. Right? That's right. Yeah, we got to keep it real.
So for me, 2015 is a lot like 2014, except there's tons more ducks, and these ducks are of different sorts. We have mallards, we have black ducks, we have hens, we have drakes. So 2014, we had 4 APIs that were really going to get most of the traffic. 2015, there's 40 APIs that are all going to get different sorts of traffic, but the mantra remains the same. Focus on what's important and focus on your philosophy, and make sure that you're, really, really consistently applying those same fundamentals. So let me break that down a little bit, right? So for Black Friday 2015, we kind of took that. I feel like I'm taking that same philosophy as we did in 2014. So initially, we want to monitor, we want to understand what our APIs are doing today, and we want to predict an understanding of when new traffic's going to come online and when we're going to see just everyday as usual traffic increase, and then we want to stimulate that. So get an understanding of where these people that are consuming the APIs, where they expect their peaks to be, what sort of throughput do they expect to come from their app, and then be able to simulate that really quickly. And then I think it's very important going into 2015 that we have a really strong positive mental attitude and proactively communicate, what's the availability of our APIs. Be very almost over communicate sort of what's going on in the platform. So it's important to kind of blog and constantly let folks know here's where the state of the union is at this point. And also this attitude that testing is the QA tester's job has to really go away. Testing and load and functional testing is really everyone's job. It's something that we all have to take part of, and we all have to contribute to its success. Mm-hmm. Then on the action side, I think, we know that when we build things using Scrum, we have the what, the how, and definition of done. And at the beginning of the year, those things were very much focused on what we could accomplish with the amount of time given to us. But now that we're getting more sophisticated, we have to continually sort of revise that and understand that, hey, the definition of done today may not be adequate for the APIs we're going to build tomorrow. So constantly revising that and make that a part of your everyday norm. And I think what helps with that is co-innovating with your partners, right? I think whenever we work with Apogee or we work with other folks in the other leaders in the QA management, QA, they help push us forward and make us think about things that we hadn't thought about. So, getting ready for that sort of innovation is important. And then, on the action side, you kind of have to be active about incentivizing and encouraging people on your team to innovate and think outside of the box, and make sure that that's something that the team that's working with you is really lined up and ready to do. And then finally, what do our results look like? Sometimes you're going to have wins, sometimes you're going to have failures. Make sure people are very comfortable that you're going to communicate whether there's a win, if there's a failure, or even if there's nothing to see. During peak seasons, a lot of times it's important to constantly make people aware that what your service level agreements are, that you're holding up, what your average response time is. Make sure the app developers also get this, but also the people that are on the target system side. So I can't stress enough that over communication and being prepared to do that going into 2015 is going to be a big part of what we need to do for our program.
Okay.
And I think finally on you got a question?
Yeah, that's great, Kris. So tell us about what you can do today.
So bring this analogy a little bit forward. We have a great program at L.L Bean, it's the Outdoor Discovery School. So if you're ever looking to take on a new hobby, so for example, we're using fly fishing here. We have this little gallery that we send people to, and people sign up for class, and then you have an instructor that's teaching you to fly fish. But you're not really out in the world yet, right? You're just at a mock kind of pond. And what he has you doing is just casting that fly over and over and over again and trying to sort of land it in a very specific spot. So my advice for people what they can do today is, try to get a hold of your people in your space and co-innovate with them, plan to have new pilot programs, plan to try out new technologies, and make sure your team is going to be mentally prepared with the new tools and knowledge that they need to go into the next 6 months. And then also, continuously inflict that load. The only way you get good at fly fishing is that you're constantly casting and you get to the point where you can land that fly in a very particular part of the lake or the stream. So, and then finally, when you're doing this kind of load and functional testing, make sure you know what's going on the back end. Make sure your technology allows you to sort of trace that transaction, not only just through the gateway, but also all the way down through the databases and the other web services and the application services that all make up kind of the back end of that. Because if you don't have a good view of it front to back, you're not going to know what's going to go on when there could be a failure. And then overall, I'd say evangelize test execution. Make sure this investment that you're making in QA with all of these automated tests, make sure that those things are easy for other people to execute as well. If you're relying on a target system, you have to sort of let the people who wrote that target system know, hey, here's how I'm testing your target system, and maybe even share those JMeter tests. And that goes the same way for app developers, right? Sometimes it helps an app developer out quite a bit when you can say, well, here's a test that kind of exercises the API. I'm pretty sure your app's going to do a lot of these same things, and typically they will. But I think, going back to that first point, piloting and co-innovating, that's what I want to do with Apogee. So let's talk a little bit about how we're going to help this out there. Raj?
Again, this is a general guideline. It depends upon how agile your teams are. But typically, this is what we have seen. So for the 3 to 6 months out, you need to start simulating your business estimates. And what I meant by that one is, work with your marketing team and other teams that are involved in this Black Friday event in terms of what kind of APIs are being exposed, what kind of promotions are being exposed, and how is that going to impact the overall API traffic. Second one, which is a bit technical, as I mentioned earlier, auto scaling is great, but keep in mind that it is not enough. We had situations where customers had auto scale, but the spike was so vertical that it couldn't handle the traffic. So this is where you can also use a lot of our policies such as spike arrest and quota to make sure that you're protecting your backend from those vertical spikes in case if you're not able to handle that volume. Next thing I would say is start getting ready to do real life simulation. And what I meant here is meant by this is simulating all the 2xx responses and requests is pretty straightforward, and most people do that. But what typically gets ignored is the error situation or the latencies going up. And so most of you that know HTTP protocol, right? Sorry, you had a question?
Well, no, I was wondering, that's not natural to think, okay, I'm going to inflict load on my error scenarios, that's going to cause the system to break in some way. So when I'm creating a load test, how much should I think about, inflicting kind of error scenarios versus kind of happy path scenarios? Do you have a general guideline there?
Yeah. That's great, actually. So typically, what I would say is, look at your pattern. Every customer is different. Every backend is different. So if let's assume that your backend currently throws 3 to 4% errors. So make sure that you kind of maybe pad it up a little bit and try to simulate 5 to 6% error scenarios. Because keep in mind that every 5xx response actually sends a connection close header. That means all the entities on the north side of your API, they will have to drop the current connection, re-establish a new connection before they can serve the subsequent request. So that's like a big thing that stands out and something that gets ignored most of the times. Second one is latency. Typical performance tests, if you use JMeter, API, A/B test, or whatever tool that is out there, the way they behave is if the latency goes up, they actually slow down. So they are being friendly to the target backend. But in real life scenario, the client applications are not that friendly because you may have a retry logic in your client that says if I don't get response in X millisecond, try it again, or if I get an error, try it again, so on and so forth. And that's when you would see that lots and lots of requests get created because of the way the client's applications are written. So make sure that you simulate those using your JMeter or A/B testing or whatever tool you're using to make sure that this is not a surprise when it comes to you. And finally, obviously, again, depending upon how agile your organization is, make sure that you start preparing for the budget and all that because you would need additional capacity and all. Going to the 2 to 3 months out, first one is backlog. Obviously, with so many things happening on the left-hand side, there will be items that will spill over. You'll have to continue to work on your error simulation, the traffic estimates, and so on and so forth. The next item is whitelisting. Most of our customers, they prefer whitelisting our IP addresses, so they don't allow any other traffic come to their APIs directly. This is often done for security reasons. The issue here is every time you need to add more capacity, it kind of goes back and forth. So we add additional capacity, we give you the IP address, then you whitelist, then we come back, then we turn it on, so on and so forth. So more often what we recommend to our customer is instead of whitelisting one IP at a time, we also make our complete subnet available to our customers so that if you whitelist the entire subnet, it becomes a lot easy for us to add more capacity. The third thing is know your limits. So through your real-life simulation, let's imagine that your backend today serves 100 transactions per second, and you're expecting 10x growth. So you scale it up to 1,000 transactions per second. But what happens when there is a catastrophic success and you get 1,500 transactions per second? In those cases, you need to make sure that you provision your APIs in such a way that when the traffic comes, you are able to successfully serve the 100% traffic and not crash completely. And finally, work together on simulated production issues with IPG as well. So we actually make ourselves available during that month for all of your performance testing and any activity that you have. And that's when we work closely with our customer to guide them through this journey.
Awesome. So it would be easy to look at this chart and say, be concerned by it or think it was unhealthy, but I think you guys would argue that that's exactly what you want it to look like leading up to Black Friday.
Exactly. So this is just a screenshot of one of our customers from Black Friday 2014. As you can see, a lot of work goes in before the actual event hits you, right? So in this particular case, the customer ran multiple tests to make sure that they're able to handle that volume. And as you can notice that around 23rd of November, 23rd, 24th, 25th, right before the actual event hit, everything was kind of frozen deliberately to make sure that everything has been taken care. We are good to go in this particular holiday season and be successful at it.
We've seen examples.
When I first saw this, when I first saw this chart, one thing that did kind of alarm me is I'm thinking, okay, well, this is an API that's obviously getting real production traffic right now, and they're also running load tests. So isn't there some risk there where I would be worried that a lot of traffic would get affected by these load tests going on?
Yeah, actually, that's a very good question. There are two scenarios that we generally go through. One is there are customers that prefer to buy additional capacity, and the way our platform works is we're able to tag additional capacity to, let's say, an environment called perf environment. So where you can pump in as much volume as you want, and it doesn't affect your real production environment. Although the API definitions, the apps, tokens, and everything else is still shared. The second scenario is where customers do not have enough capacity or they want to share their current capacity with production as well as the performance test. What they do is they typically find a window of time, like midnight to 3 a.m. at night or whatever, and then they run those tests during those hours.
Well, when those days come to pass, everything's frozen, right?
Yep.
So Kris, I'm intrigued by this slide, peak freeze or slush. Talk a little bit about that.
I mean, I don't know how other retailers feel about this, but this is maybe a little bit of an inside joke here at L.L Bean is that, the peak freeze season, nothing's supposed to change. And I think that's true for a lot of systems, but I feel like the moratorium on change is really different across all these different targets. So, when you're running your API program, you may be facading several different systems, and those systems are still changing a lot of times. They may not honor the same peak freeze that you are, especially if it's a third-party system or a vendor that you're working with. So you have to be kind of prepared, even during the peak freeze season, to that change is going to happen, right? And that you're ready to react to change. So for me, again, a lot of times during the wintertime, we may go ice fishing if the whole lake is frozen, but we're still looking for success. We're still looking for the fish, so we stuff the jack trap in there. And whenever we get lucky, the flag goes out. So I think, a lot of ways we want to act like that during peak as well. Is that you don't need to, and you shouldn't randomly mess with any kind of settings you have in your system, but you need to know which ones are most important to kind of have at your fingertips. And maybe even have a couple fire drills to make sure you're ready to pull those levers so that if the backend system goes unavailable, that you can very easily revert traffic to a different place, or if there needs to be some kind of change for a marketing event or a content event, that you're well prepared for that and going into that. So sometimes if you rest on your laurels and you think that, okay, nothing underneath my platform is going to change, you may well be surprised, and that's maybe the moral for this particular analogy. But I think after peak is kind of another scenario, right? So you definitely want to be prepared for the morning after, and because you will be, you can be surprised very, very quickly. And this is something that happened to somebody over in New Hampshire. He had his truck out, and he maybe went to sleep or whatever. He wakes up in the morning, and his truck's in the lake. So that's no good. And you should know that the weeks in the mornings after peak are really going to have various peaks of peak, as I like to think of them, because typically when you're running an API platform, you're going to see that every consumer is really going to have his own traffic pattern, his own peak in some ways, and those traffic patterns are going to change as the day rolls on. In Freeport, we're here on the eastern seaboard. We're actually really much further east than Boston or New York. So we rise up early and we have our work day, and a lot of our traffic happens on the East Coast, but then we may go home and eat dinner and spend some time with our families, and then next thing you know, really late at night, the West Coast starts coming online, and you get another traffic surge there. So really be prepared that, my peak, my Black Friday or my Cyber Monday that happens at a very particular time is going to change as the sun kind of crosses the earth. And then also, anytime there may be some kind of small outage or there's a problem with an API, be prepared that, hey, this small outage could come back to bite me later because it could be tied to a message queue, for example, and those messages were queuing up and just waiting for that API to come back available, and then there's a huge surge in demand, or if your site was down for a little while and it comes back up, then people are going to have a lot of pent-up demand, and they're going to be ready to sort of pounce on you. And finally, I'd say, even after Black Friday, be prepared to listen to the grapevine and have very regular communication with your app developers and with your target system operations team that, what's your peak looking like? Are you expecting another traffic surge? How are you thinking the year end, the free shipping cutoff, and all of these other sort of business events are going to affect your load?
So flash forward now, we're 6 months and a few days in the future. We've gotten through Black Friday 2015. We feel like we can take a bit of a breath, but I found it interesting, the comment about today's peak is really tomorrow's norm. So how do you get ready for that? Talk a little bit about what that looks like.
Yeah, I know I'm definitely glad when it's all over. I feel like I should just sleep for another month, but it's never quite the case. No, I think getting ready for peak all year round is important because, like I mentioned, as a product owner of an API platform, typically, my driving force is more traffic, is more adoption of the APIs, is delivering that value, that promise of value that APIs can deliver. So if you're doing it right, today's peak is really going to look like tomorrow's good day, and hopefully, if everything works right, that's going to be well before that next peak comes around. So, this year we could have more traffic than we had last peak in September, in August. So make sure that you're feeding that thirst of adoption, but don't forget this mantra that you're constantly modeling what the platform's doing. You're kind of predicting where the spikes are going to be, and that you're simulating it over and over again.
So you guys talked a lot about sort of planning for the error scenarios, not the happy path, if you will. So with that in mind, Rajesh, what are the things that we've learned and the things that we would do going forward differently, or both of you guys, if you look at it sort of from that perspective, areas for improvement?
Yeah, I guess the first thing we started doing is, in fact, since last Black Friday, we have spent a lot of energy and time on serviceability, reliability, availability, and recoverability aspect of our product. And those are all like the lities that help us make our platform a lot stronger and serve us through this the events that our customers are looking at us for.
And Kris, you've talked a lot about sort of the data capture, how important it is to capture data along the way, because that informs kind of future things. Can you just talk a little bit more about kind of what that looks like and how you guys collect data and how that drives some decisions?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think if you think it's sort of about the layer cake, right? So your API platform's probably sitting somewhere strategically inside of that layer cake, and your app developer is having a consumer app that's sitting right up at the top. Well, for us, we know that the performance of the API is going to be very much affected by the performance of the back end. So, using technologies that can, instrument the Java virtual machine and trace those transactions really all the way through the database are vital. And because, a lot of times, and I'm sure Apogee feels this way as much as well, is when you're on the API, when you're managing an API platform, you're typically the first guy to get blamed for like any problem at all. So unless you can know that, okay, this error was likely caused by this other cascading problem back in the back end. So I think sort of instrumenting those JVMs, there's lots of great tools out there that help to do that. And then also kind of understanding, what sort of databases maybe our APIs be relying on, what other kind of web services could be getting called, and have that front of mind, and be able to put those monitors in place. And then I think the key too is to constantly having some kind of ping that's going on that's hitting your API every few minutes, a few seconds from many different places throughout the country or throughout the world. And there was a particular situation that was kind of interesting that hit us a few months ago, where we had a brand new API we had put into production, and of course we had traffic management and rate limiting and all that on. But at a particular time every day, we noticed that the error rate would go up, and that was kind of curious. And so we put a monitor on it, and we're watching the pings, and we started finding like, wow, okay, we're starting to get spike arrests on this API. We started to get situations where the platform was actually blocking API requests, and we would have never really found that as fast as we were able to without having that monitor sitting there constantly making these requests and expecting to have a good result. So while it may be counterintuitive to still be doing testing on your API through Peak and still be monitoring and sort of having an automatic pinger going against your backend, those sort of things can really raise the flags early on, and I think that's the key to reacting to any issues.
Very good. So I think we're about 45 minutes into it. Thanks, guys. We do have a few questions, so I'm going to move to that. Give me 1 second, and I'll just throw these out to you guys, and you guys can answer away. So one question is, how do you manage your API portfolio in terms of testing? What tools or techniques do you have in place?
We use a variety of tools. I'd say, well, let me start off by talking about our philosophy for tooling on the API team. And I think for us, we know we have many APIs, and our team was pretty new to the concept. So we started off with JMeter. I think a lot of people start off with JMeter. It's a great tool. So we do most of our development with that, most of our testing with that. And then also we work with JavaScript sort of unit testing tools. So getting an understanding of how the internal code works, and other sorts of tools that allow you to test the APIs in different kind of ways. So curl loader, tracing, having monitoring tools that sit out on the internet. There's lots of examples out there for that. You can use things like RunScope or Catchpoint or Gomez. All these provide those kind of functionality, all that kind of functionality. So I think the key is when you're choosing a tool to test your API is choose something that your team can be proficient in very, very quickly, and that it doesn't take a huge upfront investment to get productive. I think the other aspect of it is, what does our deployment and testing model look like? So for API testing, I think the point is to try to make sure that all of these steps are done in an automated manner, so the friction to actually perform them is relatively low. So, to make it so if you're using a continuous integration process, that you may have some automated tests and maybe some light load or performance tests that can be done as part of those steps of deployment, and make that a priority for your team. It doesn't necessarily come naturally initially, but again, there's lots of great open source tools that can kind of help you through those deployment steps and make it part of your definition of them.
Actually, yeah. So on our side, actually, we see a bunch of our customers using various different tools. Some of them are commercial, most of them are free. Like for example, Gatlinks. A lot of people use JMeter. We have our own tool called API-B, which is an open source. So customers who are looking for a tool, please give that a try as well. And if there are any questions, we are happy to address them on our community website. Some people prefer AB, some people prefer Silk Performer. So yeah, there are a variety of those tools that are available out there.
I mean, again, I think the key of the tool is that you're proficient in it.
Mm-hmm.
That it's not it's not causing you to not be able to get to your goal.
Yeah.
Very good. Well, I think that about wraps it up. I do have one last little update. I saw on your road to 2015 Black Friday, you forgot to add in the I Love APIs conference in October, so make sure that's part of the milestones. Kidding aside, on October 12th through 14th, we have our I Love APIs 2015, so would love for you all to join that. There's going to be some great tracks kind of geared towards lots of different audiences, so go out and check out iloveapis.com, and we hope to see you there. Thanks, everybody, for joining. Kris, special thanks to you. I know you said it was a beautiful day in Freeport, Maine today, so hopefully you can enjoy that. And Rajesh, thank you as well. And with that, we will say goodbye. Thanks, everybody. Have a great evening and morning and afternoon wherever you are.